We're going to be talking about the simulation, which is, to me, personally, one of the more ludicrous forms of trying to explain the reality that we live in. And what I believe is that the reality we live in is a great deal more complex than all of that. And to try to make it as simple as saying that it's a simulation is almost a it's almost a complete fabrication onto the reality that we actually live in. So let's go real quick, and we'll start up and just go with the simulation hypothesis or simulation theory. Is the proposal that all of reality, including the Earth and the rest of the universe, could in fact be an artificial simulation, such as a computer simulation. Now, in that one sentence, there's already kind of a catch-22. And that is to say that it could in fact be an artificial simulation. As if there's anything artificial about what would be termed as real. So, some versions rely on the development of a simulated reality, a proposed technology that would be able to convince its inhabitants that the simulation was real. The simulation hypothesis bears a close resemblance to various other skeptical scenarios from throughout the history of philosophy. So, let's go real quick to those basic scenarios. And where those are is right here. So, we have Descartes and the evil demon. Now, I've talked about this before. I called it the evil genius. And that is because in the Greek, the term genius often referred to the god that you would worship in the house, and or worship above all others. Whereas, demon maybe is the counterpart to that, which is maybe why Descartes has it labeled as Descartes' evil demon, which is basically the idea that, we can read what they say, and then I can elaborate. Perhaps in all of our experiences, we are being completely. It's not perhaps. It should be said that the ideal is that in all of our experiences, we're being completely misled by a malevolent demon. If this is the case, we can't be said to truly know anything. It doesn't have to be a malevolent demon either. That's a misnomer as well. It just has to be a demon which, it doesn't have to have the ideal of harm. It just has to have the ideal of complete and utter deceit to the point where you don't understand. And I guess that is malevolence on some level. If we were in a completely different, imagine we are in a vat right now, as the next one's going to be saying. But we are in a vat right now, and, we've been dead for 100,000 years, but our body and our mind has been going on in some way, and, what would be said to be the malevolent demon has been tricking us, but it's only so that we don't realize that we're actually just in some kind of massive computer. So that kind of works into some of the same ideas of the brain in the vat that we're about to read, which is basically that, even though it's an evil demon in, the basic Greek sense, because they couldn't have even idealized easily the brain in the vat in a real way, it could be, in another sense, very easily seen in a different light if things were, in fact, being simulated for us because everything was nightmarish, which is, we're getting into silly territory because I, of course, don't believe at all in simulation. And the reason I don't believe in simulation is because I've seen the way that the world works in the human sense of an experiential nature, right? And I've seen it in very heavily drugged natures, always on psychedelics, and feel as if I've kind of come to a understanding of what it is that's sensorily real and possible. And the idea of a simulation is to discard so much of what is real. But anyway, let us continue on, where we'll get into my own philosophy later. All right, solipsism, or a brain in a vat, is the ideal that you basically are, well, again, I shouldn't, we have it in front of us. We'll go ahead and use, this because I thought it was a decent enough explanation. All right, perhaps, I don't like the way they say perhaps in front of all of these. Like, it is a perhaps question, I suppose, but it's just badly said. All right, anyway, I'm the only thing that actually exists, and everything else and everyone else is just a figment of my imagination. Well, so the problem with the way perspective and human nature works, that is actually true. It's not that they're a figment of your imagination, but they are a figment of your perspective. Your perspective, you could say, is imagination. If you were maybe insane, you would say that instead of, realizing that these perspective-based figments of your reality are in fact going to consist or be consistent throughout time and space. So it's not like you are creating and recreating reality all of the time. But anyway, so what's strange is that first line about how you're the only thing that exists and everyone else and everything else is a figment of your imagination, that is truth in a very basic sense of how perspective works. You do not get a secondary perspective. And this is also why when we talk about reincarnation, you're not reincarnating, whatever you might want to call your essence is, but you are you. You're going to exist as you always. You're going to, within the span of time and space, at some point when the time and space is right, you're going to exist just like you are now. Oh, hey, how you doing there, my delusion? But you're going to exist just like you are now. And you're going to, over the course of, time and space, die again. And, the universe at some point is going to have to restart. And so likely you're going to have literally, yourself re-existing again. But the idea that you are reincarnating is kind of a foolish notion. But anyway, let's continue onward. Or perhaps I'm not all alone, but some scientists have removed my brain, have put it in a vat or jar with all the requisite tools to keep my brain alive, and they're feeding me my experiences through electrodes. Well, I mean, that's the same as the first one. Basically, the Descartes' evil demon is the exact same thing. So, if either of these are the case, then none of my experiences are veridical. I'm not sure what veridical means. The Truman Show threat. One of the most ridiculous forms of, idyllic simulation. Because this, goes into the idea that everything around you is beyond... It's beyond... the other two are, I guess, the exact same. Unfortunately, we're working from such a bad, starting point when we're talking about simulation, I think. So, if you haven't seen The Truman Show, you should. Just because it's interesting, basically. But anyway, let's see here. Perhaps what I think is the real world is just an elaborate TV set, which would be what an insane person would think, where the producers are adjusting my circumstances for the pleasure of the audience. Could also be titled The Adjustment Bureau Threat, which is maybe a little bit more reasonable. So, the Adjustment Bureau is not the Truman Show. It's more like there's an FBI that kind of cares about the way that certain people's lives are being enacted or lived, so they try and steer them away from one person or another. It's still insane. That's what an insane person would think. So don't, get yourself wrapped up into that. And the Truman Show is much, much worse. The idea that everyone and everything around you is just a set coinciding with reality is veridical. Okay, so someone's just being a jerk off by saying that none of my experiences are veridical. They should just be saying that none of my experiences are real. What an asshole. All right, well, thank you very much for that, though, Mind Delusion. All right, so both of these things, the Truman Show idea is insane. If you imagine that, I fucking have some cats outside fighting like they've got, something to say. But I'm just going to leave them be, Anyway, so let's just move on, because if you try to imagine that, if you've seen the Truman Show, and if you haven't, go watch it. It's very simple, very good watch, especially if, when something's well made, the first time you watch it, it's always going to be a great thing to watch. But anyway, the idea that everything is a made-up reality, well, who is the horrible person that's, creating their reality in a bad way, or who is it for when someone is having bad things happen to them? That's kind of the problem with that. Anyway, let's move on. Idealism. Perhaps what we think is the material world, which is independent of the observer, is really dependent on the human mind after all, or some cosmic mind. All right, let me run through that one more time. Perhaps what we think is the material world, which is independent of the observer, is really dependent on the human mind after all. Well, but that is true. See, so here's what all of these things keep getting wrong. Is that, including the solipsism one, when they said, perhaps I'm the only thing that actually exists. From the point of perspective, you are the only thing that actually exists. And everything else is a figment of your perspective, not your imagination. If you say it's your imagination, we're starting to drift again into insanity. So anyway. But here they've said it again. So perhaps what we think is the material world, because, again, we're talking about perspective here, which is independent of the observer. It isn't, because your entire perspective defines you. And all we've learned about quantum physics says that the observer defines things more than anything else. So, it's really dependent on the human mind after all. Yes, of course it is, or some cosmic mind. Okay, so maybe when we're talking about some cosmic mind, we're talking about when the human mind is sitting there looking at the clouds, and then the sun kind of breaks through the clouds and it shines on, that person. Maybe that's what they're referencing. But anyway, let's try to move on to see what they're actually saying. Perhaps the most fundamental thing in reality is mind, and there is no matter. Well, that's not fair. It's not fair to say that there is no matter. That gets into the idea of the, and I didn't agree with it when I heard it, but the Japanese, saying that, they're going down on a boat. There are these two men are on a boat. One's a sensei, one is, the protege. And the protege says, what, or there's I'm sorry, I don't have it in my mind, but in essence, the one man says to the other, what is making it so that we're moving down the river? And he says, well, the river's current is making it so we're moving down the river. The fact that we're buoyant and the fact that we're not, sinking is making it so that we're not, failing to go downward. And he said all these things. And then, the master said back to him, no, the mind is making it so we're moving down the river. And that is true. But when we get so far removed into that sense, then we no longer have a sense of the physical, and nothing real gets done. We might as well just all be taking mushrooms in the forest and pissing and shitting ourselves and, doing nothing of value. Because, I mean, that master, by the way, was probably like a, sword master of some type. And he was probably not the kind of person who had ever worked a field, so Yes, the mind is the only thing. That is true. But it's in relation to a physical world, that whole material girl thing that Madonna said is actually has some meaning. But anyway, so this is, we've gone through the basic, ideas that were predating this computer age that now made it so we're living in a world of everything's a simulation because I've never seen a goddamn farm. And I have no idea what a cow is, and I have no idea how my milk, gets here. And even though milk is disgusting because it comes from animals and we shouldn't drink that because we're the only thing that drinks dairy, I'm okay with having 10 different kinds of imported cheeses, so let's move on to what I think is kind of the funny. We're just kind of going to, go over a couple of people saying, oh, this is obvious reasons, and here we are, 15 irrefutable reasons why we might be living in a simulation. And we'll give them, their day in court. Because, the first one they show there, the Mandela effect, actually is something that's, if you have a slightest memory, it's something very strange. But I feel like I have a real, way to describe or understand that. And, without going into what they're going to say about the Mandela effect, let's just talk about it for a moment. And that is to say that what you are doing... I got a goat hitting against my door now. Stupid thing. What you are doing when you search online is you are searching something which can easily and has easily been controlled by someone else on a very massive scale. So when we start talking about... Now, the problem is that you say, okay, well, but I remember things. I have the actual Berenstain Bears, and I say, yeah, you do, and you should, because it is Berenstain Bears. It's not Berenstain. We do have problems with that. I don't know if a simulation is the right way to describe what's happening with the Mandela effect. If it's maybe some kind of conspiracy by... what would have to be, massive tech, hoping that they can get these things through and trying to make it so they're small things so the big things look less obvious. We're talking about Berenstain versus Berenstain, whereas, the idea that maybe Nelson Mandela did die and then, they made like a mock Nelson Mandela, that never, we don't get into that point of the issue. And, it's the first time, I've really... Well, it's not the first time I've thought of such an idea, but, you don't ever get into something that's actually important usually when it comes to Mandela effect. But having said that, everything seems to be because you're saying, I can't remember the way that this is. But anyway, let's just move on and we'll try to say, okay, so some people claim TV coverage of Nelson Mandela's death in 1980, even though he actually died in 2013. 2013, odd year too, and that's because it was after December, 23rd or 24th. It's actually the 23rd or the 21st, isn't it? Which was the end of the Mayan calendar. Now, whether that's related to Mandela dying, who knows? But so let's just talk about the idea that maybe Mandela, for whatever reason, did die because a whole bunch of people remember it as such. And see, again, they mentioned the two things that I just mentioned because those are the things that kind of got locked into your mind. But if you go look up Mandela effect, you'll see there are a lot of very strange things. Does that mean it's a simulation? I can't really apply that thinking. I mean, so it's a simulation. Does that mean that what, am I getting too close to the truth so my goat's biting at my doorknob right now? No, my goat's biting at my doorknob because it wants to get the fuck in here. Yeah, it's a lot of logos, you're right. It's not a simulation. It's not like, it's not the CIA, controlling my goat, telling it to bite my doorknob so it can get into my house. That's not how things work. Mandela effect, I'll give you credit. That is a very odd thing when we're talking about a simulation. But I'd love to give you the answer. I'd love to know the answer because that's the one that's a little bit of a crux for me personally. Because, yeah, you see things with mostly logos and you see things with things that you remember, if you are old enough to remember them, and you're like, no, that's not right. I remember it like this. Here's one that I got my mother on, was the Goldie Hawn, I think it was. It's like, you like me, you really like me. You know, that Golden Globes acceptance speech. It was, you know, I was like, what does she say? She says, you like me, you really like me. And then the next moment I played it for her, and it said, you like me, thank you, or I love you, or some stupid, whatever it says in this. What about synchronicity? Any opinion or same opinion as a Mandela effect? Well, it depends on what you talk about as synchronicity. See, I often think of synchronicity in like more of a romantic sense, so I don't know when we're talking about synchronicity in relation to the simulation. I believe that, you know, you can have things like a world that has huge electronic movements, you know, in between people and things, and that can create these weird synchronicity moments that you're like, whoa, here's my one. When I was young, here's my synchronicity moment that I was like, oh, that's weird, you know, is this whole world for me? Like, kind of my Truman moment. And it was the strangest one, too, because it was related to, like, having to use toilet paper more than once, you know, and Norm Macdonald made the same kind of idea joke of how you had to keep using the toilet paper and something in SNL. And I was like, wait a second, I thought of that earlier today, or within, you know, a few days. And so, you know, you can more than likely say he probably got the exact same type of toilet paper I got. He had the same exact moment of realization that I had, and it was more co-evolution in, you know, thought process, as it were. And I wouldn't say that has to make it so that we are both running off of the same program. That's insanity. It gets, I don't know if you've ever done any, you know, psychedelics, and you've seen, you know, kind of how things can break down in your mind and your eye, and how things can kind of function. But if you do, it's just a completely different world. You realize that everything is actually so much more simple. And the real fun thing about something like psychedelics is you say to yourself, okay, well, if you have something that's not real, then was that because you were thinking about it? Yeah. So if you have something that's not real, you are really quite disturbed by it. So I've never seen anything that's not real. So your brain really keeps itself on point, and it says, okay, no, this is exactly what's working. This is exactly what's happening in this exact moment, and it's able to decipher in a way that makes it so that when you say simulation, you're like, no, that can't be possible. Yeah. So let's try to go on, because this is Vulture, so we might skip over a couple of missing aliens. We spent billions sending probes through outer space and should have found, well, this is just it. Have we spent billions throwing probes through space, or have we just been tunneling into our Earth and making it so that when we attack each other with nuclear weapons, that the real rich people are going to have somewhere to go? Because I'm not completely convinced that we've been sending probes through space, only because of the what is that belt of, you know, radiation that basically kills everything, and made it so that we definitely had to, even if we went to the moon, we definitely didn't get any of the logs back. We definitely didn't get any of the video back, because they had to go through that belt of radiation. So, you know, it's not saying that we didn't go to the moon, but all of the footage had to be made up. Not a chance in hell that it wasn't made up. And, you know, so the idea, too, that somehow we're getting information through that radiation belt, I mean, maybe we've gotten better, you know, and for what it's worth, I don't know enough about it. I'm a very empirical person. If you can't empirically show me why something is happening, and what empiricism is something you can see with your eye. If you can see it with your eye, then you know that it's real. And that means that even a video, and so here's one other thing. You can say, okay, so empirically, if you trust somebody else, you can say, okay, well, we talked on the phone, or we talked over Facebook. You can say, well, when you see them in person, you can say, well, you talked to me over Facebook, so empirically, I can know that you are real, or you were over there, you know. And if you could say that, you know, they were on the moon, if you believe they're on the International Space Station, then you can absolutely say, yes, empirically, I believe that, you know, all of it's real. But that's a hard one. Yeah, and the see, you're a real smart, mind delusion. Van Allen radiation belt, which is just a hard one to fathom how you get all of this information through it. So anyway, let's try to move on because, yeah, this is, again, vulture. So, electrons that can't make up their mind. So this is what we were talking about earlier about quantum physics and why you're allowed when you're talking about philosophy to say that the observer, first and foremost, controls, reality. Because he frankly does. Reality is a basis of perspective and time. And both of those are kind of not real things. They are functions of, these electronic movements in your head. So that doesn't necessarily mean that what you're... Yeah, see, and that goes back to, the evil genius, idea that maybe everything is just a deception. But, the point is that you're literally the point of perspective that makes reality function. You are the thing that makes it so that everything actually works. And that doesn't in any way show that it's a simulation. Let's see why they say that. That's so strange. That's almost the exact opposite. It shows how important you are and how little importance almost everything else is, unless you endow it with importance because you're important. There's a big philosophy behind that I have, but... All right, in physics, famous double-slit experiment. Okay, they're just going to talk about it, usually producing an interference, but yeah, blah. But when the same experiment is conducted under observation, electrons behave like particles, not waves. And there's no interference pattern. Some have taken this to mean our simulation is conserving its Okay, well, see, Vulture is showing how it's piles of horse shit. It's like showing the exact opposite. It's showing how strange and interesting our world is. It's not showing that. See, okay, so this does get to something important though, which is the whole idea behind the missing 411. And the missing 411 are people who go out into wild, strange reaches of the wilderness. Where I live right now, I'm up in the mountains where it's freaking cold as hell, right? But anyway. So they're out in the wild reaches of the wilderness, and somehow, the simulation can't keep functioning. It can't, process enough, so they have to just get blipped out of existence. Retarded. So stupid. So stupid. Makes zero sense. No sense made from that idea. If you're saying somehow that rendering a city, a single apartment in a city, all of those apartments in a city are somehow easier... Shouldn't, every once in a while, Detroit get blipped out of existence? Fucking, Japan, somewhere, Okinawa, somewhere huge, just get blipped out of existence and come back? Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. The processing power to do something as simple as all of the things that would be in a single apartment is so much harder than a whole shitload of trees. So let's just toss that out the window. So the missing 411, those people are getting killed by animals or something is happening to them. Stop acting like we're in a simulation and giving that an easy pass for why all these people are disappearing. That's not how it's just think. That's not how it works. If you haven't seen, if you can't do it. See, I believe I can make the sun come out at certain times. If I'm looking at, the clouds, I can do that in my mind. Now, can I do it enough so that I could show it on a, scientific level? I don't know. Maybe I should, try it out. But, and other people, it's in Higher Love that, he says, he can make the sunshine from pure desire. I'm not the first person that said this idea. But, I've lost my point, in, whatever the hell this Vulture is just so stupid that... And also, they are not even mentioning, what I thought they were going to mention, which is the fact that when you're looking at an electron that's buzzing around, an atom, and you take a picture of it, that, it doesn't, it's actually, not, you make an image of it, and you can take an image at the exact same time, and the electron can be in two separate places, because it's actually, like a quasi non-real, field, because it is electricity. It's a very strange thing. But anyway, let's try and move on. DNA that contains a computer oh god, see, these are really getting bad. I don't understand what the point of Vulture is. I don't understand what the point of a lot of these, potential Anyway, I love that climate change is there, because we can quickly refute climate change, which is great. So, in 2017, a multidisciplinary group of researchers at the University of Washington, great. I live in Washington, but, I don't trust the University of Washington. Anyway, proved that they could embed malicious computer code into physical strands of DNA. Why are they trying to do that? Anyway, their aim was to show the computers working in gene sequencing when were vulnerable to attack. None of that makes any sense. Okay, but they may also have inadvertently revealed that we perceive to be biological reality was in fact computer code all along. No, they didn't. They just showed that they can put malicious computer code into DNA, which isn't what they did. They made it so that there's some kind of thing that literally can enact. It's not even going to be, you can't call it computer code because it's going to be a physical entity, right? It's not computer code. It's not like there's a computer sending code. They're saying that they put some kind of coding in through a series of amino acids, and that amino acid strain can then affect the physical strands of DNA and, cause problems. That's not the same thing. How stupid. How stupid. God, Vulture, fuck you. All right, climate change. How convenient. Our civilization is just coincidentally... So, remember when climate change used to be global warming? Remember how they tried to sell it as global warming, and now it's no longer global warming because, first of all, we want the globe to be warmer. We'll never have a problem if the globe is warmer. We'll literally have problems if the globe, goes through a freezing cycle. No problems ever if the globe's warmer. So anyway, all right, climate change. How convenient. Okay. Set up on the cusp of environmental chaos. No, it is not. No, it's not. Why would you say that? The massive amount of plastic that was in the ocean, it's basically disappeared on its own because of bacteria. Nobody talks about that. It all just kind of flies away from them. The huge, the large portion of the ozone that doesn't exist over, some portion of the space in the north or wherever it is, never did. It never did, and it fluctuates to being smaller and larger in a normal, natural way. Do I believe in climate change? Do I believe that climate change, what does that mean? Does the climate change? Yes, it does. But does that mean that we're actually having it so we as humans have an effect? I can't believe we're that powerful. It just makes no sense at all. We don't have that much strength. We're not that powerful as an entity. No matter how much coal we burn, there's always going to be... the amount of ocean that exists and the amount of algae that exists could always take in more carbon dioxide and pump out more oxygen so that we're never going to be in a problem. We always want the Earth to be warmer. Even if that killed off all of the Great Barrier Reefs, it'd be really sad, right? But what would actually happen once we killed off all those Great Barrier Reefs is something else would exist, something else would live there, and same if a bunch of fish died, a bunch of other fish wouldn't die. And we'd all live, and you know what would happen if there was a massive freezing cycle? All humans would die. I don't know if that's a good thing. I think that's a bad thing, except for maybe a small amount in Africa, like what happened last time. We don't want that. I don't want that. I would prefer it be warm. I can't believe we as humans can maybe even make an effect on that. But if our effect is trying to make it so that we have more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, I think that's a good thing. I can't believe that climate change is something that we as humans have so much hubris to imagine that we can change the climate, that we can actually do that with some kind of force that would recognize us and respond. I just don't. I don't think that's possible. I think at one point there used to be such higher levels of oxygen that's provable and such higher levels of carbon dioxide, and if we got back to those points, then we might very well be much stronger. We might have bigger bodies. We might have the ability to breathe oxygen and not have it be such large, deep breaths. And if you took a deep breath, it's, you did that once a day. That's the world I'd prefer to live in, is a higher parts per million of oxygen and carbon dioxide. And if it's a little bit warmer, It's not going to get so warm that we're all going to die because we have just we don't have enough heating to make that actually work out. And we can always move up into the cooler environments, I think. All right. So let's move on with this. Vulture, video games that look like real life. I don't know if I even care to engage this one for why this makes simulation theory real. Because they think we're getting closer to making it so people can see things. Weird news. All right. Some of the proposed recent unlikelihood, including Donald Trump's election. Okay, see, so this is a good reveal. Brexit and the 2017 Oscars envelope mix-up. Like, who gives a shit about that third one? And the year's 25-point Super Bowl comeback could mean we're in a malfunctioning simulation or whoever is pushing the buttons is screwing with us. Maybe you just are... See, this person definitely lives in a city, in a big city, and they have no real sense of reality. And that's what's actually happening here. They literally don't have a sense that maybe other people think differently than them, that somehow people in British, areas that are probably a bit richer than them don't want to have tariffs or weird things happening from some outside source like the EU, where they're literally being bureaucratized into insanity. It's... If you were anyone, you would never... If you were a nation like us in America... You would never want anybody to have any kind of control. If anything, you are the leader, and you always have the ability to back out of it. Otherwise, no. It's kind of like NATO. I would imagine that's what we're doing in NATO. I would hope. But anyway, and the Oscars envelope mix-up, that's what shows you that stupid people show you that a simulation is what's... God, fuck you. I think there's some better things that at least are trying to prove the simulation is right, and some of these other things I have as tabs. Quarks with computer code. All right, let's see whether this is... All of these have been really bad, though. Seemingly not crazy theoretical physicist James Gate claims he has identified what appears to be actual computer code embedded in the equations of string theory. String theory, which is a very, very hard to understand and maybe complete bullshit. But I don't know enough about it. It could be... They say there's up to 13, different dimensions in string theory. I've heard some things that make it make sense, but, it doesn't kind of work that well with relativity, I understand. Or maybe it does. I don't know. But who knows which of these is right. I haven't done enough research on string theory, so let's stop talking bad about it. That describe the fundamental particles of our universe. Okay, he says he found error-correcting codes that what make web browsers work. They're what make web browsers work. No, they're not. They're what make things work, and that's why we, use them. What are you, crazy? So why were they in the equation? I was studying about quarks and electrons and supersymmetry. The error-correcting codes that might happen in something like biological chemistry are something that has to occur or else everything falls apart. I mean, are you crazy? You have to have these things work or else everything just dysfunctions. And we understand that, and that's why we couldn't exist if our, see, like, we live at 98.5 degrees Fahrenheit, but pigs, their body temperature is at like 100-something degrees Fahrenheit. If our body temperatures were that different, then what would end up actually happening, that is to say, if we were at their temperature for long enough, our DNA code, like, ends up unstranding, and so we can't get good readings out of it. We end up making bad, cells, and then we end up dying because these cells are not functioning the way that they're supposed to. So, these error-correcting codes that are happening, that they're seeing in, quarks, of course they have to happen. They have to happen for reality to exist. But that doesn't say that simulations occur. It says that reality, expects something of, the thing that is being made into existence. It expects something, and those expectations are pretty simple. To have something like a atom not fold in on itself. I mean, come the fuck on. All right, why does our universe have rules in the first place? All right, I'm not even going to go into it. We're just going to keep reading. It's not actually possible to prove we're not living in a simulation. Yeah, and that's exactly the same problem with the evil genius or the evil demon theory, that literally, everything could be us being, completely tricked at all moments. We could be completely tricked at all moments. Yeah, sure. Stupid. Good way to make that one of your points. The Goldilocks zone. I don't know what it means. I don't care. Sorry, Vulture, you've lost me. It makes more sense than ghosts. Ghosts don't make sense. If you believe in ghosts, you're crazy. Ghosts, okay. Here, I don't want to say that. If you believe in ghosts, maybe you're not crazy. I have never seen ghosts. I have never imaginatively envisioned a ghost. I've never had anything like that in my perspective nature as a human. I'd love to, so then I could understand you. And I've seen, videos that are very strange, that could be ghosts. But anyway, we already know what the bricks of our matrix are. And then they do the Yanny versus Laurel. Well, but see, the Yanny versus Laurel thing is more than likely the way that the speaker was interacting with the type of video. So I don't agree. None of these things are okay. We're already good at making simulations, and we're getting even better. All right, so here's another really interesting point about simulations that we could make that would be exactly like what we're living in now. The amount of energy that it would take would be so monumentally large that, only I could exist in reality. Only I, or only one other person. That's insane. I've seen them exist through a consistent space, and if I'm the only one that can exist, I can make them reappear or exist, by me calling them. So no. The amount of literal energy it would take is so monumentally large, and it's like beyond what one could functionally imagine on any kind of scale. If we're to imagine that all of reality and all of space is what they say it is, and there's all of these infinite places, and that new galaxies are being born, like there's big bangs that are happening all over the place. It's not that there was just a single big bang. Yeah, I can't imagine that a simulation that could be made could function without infinite energy. And at that point, aren't we talking about just normal existence? And so the other thing about a simulation is that somebody starts the simulation, or somebody is watching the simulation, or it exists in space outside, or there's someone existing in space outside of the simulation. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because of the amount of energy it would take. Again, it's just about energy transference. Even with the computers they're making now, which are these strange computers that are like liquid, that are being able to do processes at huge numbers, even they couldn't make a simulation which was as complex as what we are seeing in our reality. So I'm gonna try to move on to something else, because I feel like we're getting bogged down in that. So, Scientific American. High-profile physics and philosophers gather to debate whether we are real or virtual and what it means either way. How fucking stupid are they? And I put this one up, and yeah, I didn't accept their cookies. You can't see. That's what that privacy thing's saying there. But anyway, and I put this up because I just wanted to, give, and these are both perspectives which I think are stupid, but give, what I think is a good, or should be a good perspective from a Scientific American versus someone from Vulture. Vulture, which is a carrion-eating bird. Anyway, if you, me, and every person and thing in the cosmos were actually characters in some giant computer game, we would not necessarily know it. The idea that the universe is a simulation sounds more like the plot of The Matrix. But it's also, see, here's an interesting thing that they just did. They kind of built, this is like a sales ladder. They built a yes ladder. They're like, you know the Matrix. You know. So, I mean, obviously, we're all living in this fake simulation horseshit because you know the Matrix. But it's also a legitimate scientific hypothesis. Everything's a legitimate... Let me tell you a legitimate scientific hypothesis. It is the idea that we are all made of bacteria, or there's bacteria in our gut, and initially everything was bacteria. There was nothing but, mitochondria and other things, and they were eating each other and making larger cells. And that it's actually, the fact is that we're all just transferring bacteria around, and we're just these bacteria holding cells. And that we, when we die, and you know that this is true because when we die, we pee and we shit, so all of the bacteria in our body gets pushed out so that it can continue to exist, as part of the hypothesis. And it makes a whole series of these stupid claims, and, it's actually a series of claims which, can't be refuted because, you can't go back in time and decide whether or not that's real. Isaac Asimov debates, huh? I might have to look at him. But you can't go back in time and decide whether or not it's real because it's kind of like, the primordial soup. We just can't get back to the primordial soup stage. So we're not able to prove that hypothesis. So, I mean, to say it's a legitimate scientific hypothesis is just to say you believe it's legitimate. All right, so researchers pondered the controversial notion Tuesday at the annual Isaac Asimov Memorial Debate here at the American Museum of Natural History. And I don't really like Neil deGrasse Tyson because he is really, really tight. He doesn't have any ability to go outside what I would say is the box, I guess. Let's make it simple. I would say the status quo because that's what he is. He is the status quo. But anyway. Moderator Neil deGrasse Tyson, director of the museum's Hayden Planetarium, puts the odds at 50-50. Yeah. Well, it is good that he is only moderating. But he puts the odds at 50-50 that our entire existence is a program on someone else's hard drive. Someone else's. Someone else. Who's someone else? I don't know. Someone who's got a lot of fucking energy or is so advanced that they've been able to, fold time and space to the point that they can not have to use energy to make this simulation. What a horseshit. I think the likelihood may be very high, he said. He noted the gap between human and chimpanzee intelligence. And if we look at Greek, mythology, that's all related to the fact that we learned how fire works. And if they learn how fire works, we'll see how quickly they, move up in intelligence. They may very well just jump through the Stone Ages and everything else. And we could just be seeing, something completely new out of nowhere. All right, so the gap between, it's 98% of our DNA is the same. Okay, well, 2% of DNA difference makes differences between us and, jellyfish and huge things, What are you talking about? Somewhere out there could be a being whose intelligence is that much greater than our own. We would be drooling, blithering idiots in their presence. No, we wouldn't. We just wouldn't understand what they were saying, and they would have to explain it to us over the course of time, and then we would slowly understand it. If we probably mated with them over the course of maybe 2 or 3 generations, we'd be almost the exact same. So quit acting like that. It's stupid. And it's also weird because are they trying to set up like, hey, if aliens do come, you got to say they're amazing because it's not like somehow we couldn't. And let's talk about aliens for just a moment. Isn't it strange that Israel has actually come out and said that there is a global alien confederacy, and they're waiting for us to be a one world government in order for us to join? And then only when we do that can we join, and that's what this whole Great Reset and all the COVID shit's all about, But the point is that Israel actually came out, and they didn't say that second part, but they did say that there is a one world, or a confederacy of aliens that are waiting for us to do a series of things before we're going to be able to be part of, the Federation of Planets nonsense. But literal actually came out in the news, insanity. If that's the case, it's easy for me to imagine that everything in our lives is just a creation of some other entity for their entertainment. Well, that's because you're stupid and you're fucking really simple. I can't believe that you would think that everything would be a creation for somebody else's entertainment. It's just too basic. It's too basic. That's not... I've had experiences which are completely outside of that would say that that's not how reality works. But he hasn't. He's never done anything, to get himself into a state of mind which would make him think that we're in some place that might be special or unique. All right, a popular argument for the simulation hypothesis came from the University of Bostrom. Yeah, we all know that. We suggested that that members of an advanced civilization with enormous computing power might decide to run simulations of their ancestors, which is stupid because it would take so much more energy than we can even begin to imagine, and they wouldn't be simulations in the same sense as we're imagining our world is. It's too much to simulate. That's my end of that argument, I believe. Oh, we might be virtual. Yeah, see, so what this is really doing is it's saying, hey, let's kind of trick people before we make them all go into VR, because we don't want them all to walk around, and do things. We want to just basically use them as, the Matrix style, heat pods that we can take energy from or something. I don't know what the hell the point is. What is the end game? I don't know what the end game is of trying to tell people that, things aren't important. All right, so let's try to move on and see if there's something that's, the Ghost Diaries. Oh man, let's see if we can't get this to come back up with, all right, there we go. The Ghost Diaries. That's great. Nick Bostrom has become somewhat of a cult celebrity in fringe circles for his authorship of the simulation theory. The theory supposes blah, blah, blah. Actual theory is more elegant than our description, is better understood. Yeah. Oh my gosh, you guys say nothing. For most people, I was thinking that this might be one of the... Okay, here we are. This might be one of the harder ones to, justify. Well, just restarting over and over again, huh? All right. It has been suggested that the simulation theory would actually help explain paranormal activity. Stupid. Such as ghosts, haunted houses, ESP, and its myriad forms. So, I mean, maybe we don't talk about the ether anymore. The ether is something that used to be a real thing, that people used to care about, they used to actually talk about in scientific studies. And I understand that we've moved into this Western theology. I call it a theology. It is almost. But this Western philosophy of medicine, which is much more valuable in a lot of ways, but some things that, are related to the ether we've completely lost. And, things like ghosts and haunted houses, places that might be incredibly odd feeling or dysfunctional. The thing is, I've been to places where people are like, oh, this is haunted. The guy who built this house, he hung himself right here. And I was like, okay, seems like a pretty nice house. Is that me? Am I just the person that just is like, I can't feel ghosts? Maybe. Maybe they're just like, hey, we're not going to hang around this guy. We'll wait till he leaves, and then we'll start bothering these stupid people. Maybe. I don't know. But it feels to me like the whole ether, idea has kind of been lost. And maybe it's been lost on me, too, because I don't believe in ghosts to such a point that, Okay, so they talk about the Fermi paradox, which is the idea that we should have, some creatures that have visited us at this point, and we haven't. So maybe that makes it more of a simulation, I guess. Well, the simulation there would state simply that the reason we haven't found any signs of extraterrestrial life is because it wasn't written into the universe we occupy. See, now that's a really stupid version. Instead of going into the idea that when you go into or past a certain amount of space travel, that it would denature you to such a point that you would no longer be yourself, something along those lines. There was a series, or that there are a series of barriers in between the living planets, and that when they try to pass through, they're always getting killed. There are a series of philosophies that deal with the Fermi paradox very well. So that's not really a great, reason why we're in a simulation. All right, lattice quantum chromodynamics. Good Lord, I never heard of this. All right, so uh okay, yeah. I you never want to read the first sentence because it always says nothing. A team of German physicists think that eventually we will be able to paint a better portrait of the so-called numerical simulation that is our universe. The numerical simulation that is our universe. If they could just reword that a little bit, but they're not. They want to reword it like that. Yeah. So my delusion said it's weird to think that reality is just a more advanced form of D&D for other life forms. Yeah, that's what. But see the problem with a lot of people is that they play games and they don't realize that a life, you are playing this game. You are in this life and you're in this, and you can do things, and that's kind of what games are really art imitating life. They aren't life imitating art. It's not the other way around. It's literally people are being like, I built a house and I'm going to go and build a simulation of how you build houses. It's so much more. I hate Minecraft because you can literally go and do everything that you do in Minecraft if you go buy some land and do it in real time, and it's actually very, very enjoyable. But yeah, let's see if we can actually try to decipher what they're trying to say here. All right, they're working to create a mini simulation that requires physical constraints in order to run. They want to see if those same constraints. They say very little to nothing so far. All right. In order to create the simulation, the physicists are using lattice quantum chromodynamics to try and discover whether they are in an underlying grid to the space-time continuum in our universe. It's so weird what they're trying to say. Though they have only recreated a tiny corner of the known universe, a few femtometers across, they have simulated the hypothetical lattice and are now looking for matching physical limitations. No, what they're doing is they're running a really simple, really stupid simulation on a computer that is not even close to what is happening in reality. And though they may be able to decipher something that helps us or build something that is of value, it is not even close to a way to prove that we're in a simulation. The way you prove that we're in a simulation is somehow you take, enough drugs, or you fucking get so into the state of, Kundalini spirit or whatever it is that you can just reach through the wall and see that it's not there. Don't give me that, let's not play this with some stupid, we're going to make a computer, simulation to prove that we're in a simulation. No, if we're in a goddamn simulation, you move something with your mind, and then you turn it into a bunny rabbit, then you turn it into a beautiful lady, and then you turn it back into a teacup. You don't fucking play around with this, we're kind of in a simulation, Because if we're doing it like that, well, no, then we're in the same reality that we've been in since the start of our philosophical understanding. So don't play it like that. It's just not... This is a bad way to try to prove your point. All right. In the last couple of years, theoretical physicist James Gate, I think we've read a little bit about this before. It didn't say anything, though. So while no one claims this is... Okay, so they actually say something in the first... It's hard with anything that you're reading, to find out when they're actually going to talk. All right. So... discover something extraordinary. Essentially, deep inside the equations we use to describe... Yeah, he found that there's computer code. It's not computer code. It's not error-correcting block code. That's not what it is. That's not a good way to describe it. What you should be doing is you should be looking at exactly how that works in reality and making your block code off of that. You should be changing binary so that it works in the way that this works, because that's a better function. That's the function that's happening in reality versus what we've been making in binary. So you should definitely be looking at that the same way we looked at wings of animals. We looked at the eyes of birds and of other things to make our telescopes. Go look at that again and then redo, your C++. Because that's really what you should be doing. You shouldn't be trying to say, oh, well, this proves us on this other thing. No. What you should do is you should go look at that again and use it instead of trying to use it to prove a bad philosophical point. All right. Universe simulation alert. Why scientists should never investigate brain in a vat theory. I didn't look into this yet, but I thought it was kind of an odd thing. Though they have a Vox Media. Oh, it's Elon Musk, too, talking. Elon Musk, people like this, I don't think that they understand how simulation is so fucking stupid, because they are so... it's not like Asperger's or it's not like autistic, but it's something in that same form where they just are disconnected. They're too disconnected. Their brains are not working in the way a normal human's brain works. All right. Theories are universe is actually a simulation. Has been posed for centuries. French, the brain in the vat, blah, blah. We read about that earlier. Meditations on first philosophies. Yeah, all right. Technical advances mean more. I believe inside of virtual. Thank you for saying nothing. All right. In 2003, oh God, this is just it. You can see there isn't much to the theory because they just keep repeating the same bad thoughts. There's just 2003, Bostrom, blah, 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 blah. Because their computers would be so powerful, they could run. That's not potentially true. Even if their computers are so powerful, it doesn't mean that they have the amount of power to run them. Not for something as stupid as a simulation. Not when that amount of power... Okay, so this is a time when we've perfected nuclear power. This is what we're imagining. We perfected nuclear power. You get 30 power plants for your one computer. What would normally be 30 power plants for our, world, you can use for that one simulating computer because, we're the government. We did it. Am I saying that maybe they might have enough power then? Wouldn't the heat transfer of the power be so massive that you would automatically overheat? So now what? You have this next to the ocean and it's like a normal power plant and it's being washed in with water or something to cool it. Fuck you. This is impossible. This is impossible. You want to talk about global warming. You want to talk about something warming just in general. Let's say that you do have it out in space. And maybe then... Jeez, man. I don't know. You're really, really making these things so difficult to justify that we might be in a simulation. That's the first one that made sense, though. You could have some type of massive nuclear facility out in the depths of space, and this huge moon-sized computer that was constantly being cooled by the fact that it was in space and there were fans or something that were constantly bringing in this air, this non-air. I don't know how the zero-G air would, I don't know how you would cool. You lost me. I don't know. So that's a lot. It's a lot to expect to make it so that you couldn't be in an atmosphere and have a simulation computer running. Let's say that. I'll say that. That's going to be my end on that. All right. The men who are convinced we're all living in a simulation. All right. So Dale Baker was introduced to simulation theory when he was an idiot. 18-year-old freshman. Yep, of course. The idea of reality may be nothing more than a computer-generated simulation was first presented in Religion vs. Science, even though it's basically saying the same thing that religion says. Stupid. Nick Bostrom, stupid. We all know that the Earth as we know it is 4.5 billion years old, he reasoned. At that time they thought it was, but now we think it's 6 billion or some ridiculous amount. So we don't have any real clue. That's some of the non-empirical, proof of, where we're living. They're just saying things. They're saying numbers. They're saying words. There's no empirical proof other than their massive calculations, which don't justify it. Okay, so here's, this bad person saying, and bad person, I mean stupid, bad. That bad means, evil, unjust. This is just an idiot. I come to the reality that this entire world is fake. We don't really exist. The Cubs and Trump in the same year, this is a simulation. Is that because Trump is a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it because the Cubs winning is a good thing? Is it a bad thing? how does this compare to you? What about the people in Argentina that don't give a shit about any of this stuff? Is their world more fake or less fake? Do they not exist? Is that what you're saying? I don't know. All right, the tweet was part joke, part truth. No, it wasn't part truth. I guess there was truth that the Cubs won and Trump, won the presidency. I guess. All right, if Trump and the Cubs can win, anything is possible. Is that what you mean by it? Is that what you meant? I don't know if that's what you meant. All right. If you would argue his point of the past year has been strange. Oh, yeah? Is this in 2016? Past year has been strange. What about the past year now, you fucking nuts? Everybody's been, acting like there's some kind of death. All right. Talking about COVID real quick, there's a great story called The Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. And it's about Prince Prospero. And he has this beautiful garden party in these 7 rooms that are all different colors. And, everybody is dressed in kind of fancy regalia. They've got different costumes of any kind that you could think. And someone comes in dressed as the Red Death. Well, what the Red Death is a person who is in death raiment. So, cloth that you would put over the dead. And they had blood over their, mouth and dribbling on the death raiment as well. And what the Red Death was, as a point of interest, as a disease, was something that you would get, and you would start to cough up blood, and then you would die very soon after. And if you got it, you died. Everybody died. And that's the point of the story, is that, Prince Prospero goes to the guy. Everybody's backing away from this thing because they're so disturbed by the fact that somebody would come in dressed as the Red Death. And Prince Prospero goes up to him, and as he's leaving, that is, the Red Death is leaving, which is, an interesting, point. Prince Prospero goes up to him, and he, confronts him, and the Red Death turns around, and Prince Prospero dies instantly. And the entire, party dies, of course, because the Red Death had came to the party and everyone got sick and died. But, that's just a little aside about, the fact that if we were having 22% death rates or something insane, sure, I understand why we're shutting things down and we got to try to eliminate the disease consistently, throughout the world. But since it's 99.98% death rate or life rate, and a 0.02% death rate and a 0.00% death rate for people that are over or under the age of 50 or under the age of 40. Is it 40 for the 0%? Maybe it's 20. Gosh, for 0%, I think it's 20. I think it's like 0.001 or something for 40. It's very low. But anyway, let's try to get back to the simulation. Some have welcomed the changes, but for others, they have been so drastic and swift that they defy all logic. The changes of what? Life? Pop culture figures dying? Oh, fuck you. So, let's move on from whatever this is. Is a simulation theory real? Excuse me, here's what scientists have to say. Scientists, like there is a scientist or the scientist that you can go to that knows everything. What the fuck are you talking about? And look at this. This is just goddamn propaganda. They show you a video game controller as if life was some kind of video game. It's not. Like I said before, it kind of is in the way that you can do things that you do in video games, but that is not life imitating art. It's art imitating life. We're making those things into video games because we do them in life, not the other way around. All right. Do you ever wonder if the stars, and this is again another one that's crap, but we'll try. All right, you ever wonder if the stars you gaze so fondly at are all part of some big illusion? Do you ever think, that the moon is made of cheese? Talking about the moon, we've never seen anything but one flat side of a moon. So for what it's worth, we don't know that there are any planets that aren't flat planes. So we don't know if our planet is actually round or a flat plane on an empirical study, because empirically the only planet we can see appears to be a flat plane, including the sun. And I account for that in that we are, if you know how we're actually moving through space, so here's the sun, we're moving like this, right? The sun's here, we're moving around it. The sun's moving, and we're moving like this. We're moving forward and around. So that may mean that we are a comet that's going through space, and we have a comet tail. And likewise for the sun. I don't have enough to empirically say any of that. See, that's the problem with empiricism, is that you got to say, all right, well, I need to go up into space and see it to be able to say it, and that's gets real problematic real quick, because it just costs lots and lots of manpower and energy to imagine doing those things if that's how it all works out. So, or if the pizza delivery guy you forgot to tip wasn't real but just a character. That's gross. That's fucking gross, man. To justify not tipping somebody because they're a fucking goddamn character in a video game to you? Ugh. As strange as it may sound, some people actually believe this is to be true. It's called the simulation theory. That's a good way to really make it look bad. Holy shit. That's fucking great. What assholes. Alright. Raise a possibility of humanity living inside a computer, blah, blah, blah. You know what's interesting about Nick Bostrom? Is that he never really believed in the simulation theory that we're living inside a computer. He said it was much less likely than 50%. Or he said it was less than 50%. I'm adding the much less likely because I want to give him some credit. But he did believe it was possible that we could make a simulation or something, was the point. Or no, he just posited because we're making simulations that eventually we might be able to make one that is as complex as our reality. It's a little bit insane. Because of the constraints we talked about earlier with heat and movement of power. Don't believe it. I just can't believe that that's how... God, that would be so difficult. I'm thinking of the logistics of how you would try to make that work, because you would have to make systems that were delivering power so close to the transfer points. So, I mean, you would have like these huge solar arrays, or you'd have these huge nuclear arrays that were then had to have such small transfer points to these huge process. Yeah, it's madness. All right, so this means they'll use their enormous amounts of computing power, not thinking about any of the stuff we're talking about logistically on the other end with heat, simulations of their ancestors. Yeah, so this is the exact same thing. Is this... Do people ever write anything new when it comes to simulation theory, or is it all the same shit? All right, so let's see what Lisa Randall said. Holds the opinion that there is no solid evidence to prove the simulation theory, so one person is not an idiot. In fact, she also believes that even if there was a technologically advanced civilization that could create real-life simulations, there's no reason for them to even bother simulating humans. All right, see, so now you can see that she's got a weird, like, leftist bend, too. It's like, oh, well... Why would they even create humans? Because they want to see how humans would act, in a society or in a office culture, so then they can hire the right people or whatever, so that they can make money off it usually. So, I mean, she's right that it's very unlikely that we're living in a simulation, though. Again, Mandela theory is a hard one to fight because of the Mandela effect, Mandela theory. He had a theory. But the Mandela effect's a hard one to fight. It is, because there's some... It's just fucking weird. It's weird. There's a lot of weird stuff about it. Okay. Alright, so let's just get through this next moment, because it looks like that's it. Alright, so the simulation theory has even led some thinkers to coincide with religion. Many religions believe that there is a creator, God, aka a simulator, blah, 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 blah. Are you even saying anything? You're not saying anything. You're not saying anything. You're not saying anything. There's an architect who has constructed our entire universe, so the modern idea of simulation is just a way of using science to deduce facts rather than faith. Yeah, so... yeah, there is this thing, I think, when we're going to wrap this up a bit now, and there's this thing with the simulation, I feel like. And it's got to do with the idea that people who are very scientific want to have a religious thing. They want to be religious, but they can't because they can't believe in God. And they can't believe in God because whatever it is. I believe that we're all individual gods based on the fact that our own perspectives are defining everything, and that without our perspectives, the reality that is our reality ceases to exist. Does that mean that all of reality ceases to exist? No. But what happens to you after you die is you're going to be born again as your child self, and you're going to relive your life, because that's the only portion of reality you know. You don't get to be part of something else, in my eyes. If reincarnation exists, well, I don't believe that you're the thing reincarnating. I think some portion of you that is outside of what you would call your experience is the thing reincarnating. And so to even say it's you is kind of a strange thing, and kind of a disassociation with the enjoyment of your own personal experience. But, to imagine that everything is a simulation is the same thing as the very, very basic, evil genius or evil demon philosophy. And if that's how you want to live your life, you want to live your life where you believe that everything is this misgiving, this trick, this deceit, that everything, or even that it's kind of like the Adjustment Bureau, that, somebody is, planning to get you to do this or get you to take your car at this exact time because they know that somebody's going to be out that's going to run a light and they're going to hit your car or something. It's just goes into a place where I think paranoia and insanity start to hold a higher sway than rationality and reason. And I think that if you were poor, or you had ever dug a water line for yourself and you realized that no, your water comes from the, snow melting, and that, you have to literally install a line to make it so that the water comes into your house, and you have to install a hot water heater, you have to do things. When you have to do things, you realize it's not a simulation. When everything is given to you, you might as well be living in a simulation because it's not real. You haven't proved that reality is real by having to show it through your experiential nature. So that is why people who are very privileged in their forms and don't know it, don't realize that just to have running water that is hot and cold and is potable, which my water isn't even potable for what it's worth. I'm drinking this, and a lot of people drink bottled water anyway, but I've got to use the bottled water for, pasta and things like that. But they don't have a good sense of the fact that, they're in this amenity-filled city. They don't understand that that's why it's so expensive to live. They don't get these things, and they think that it's all a simulation. They think everything can be free, but they don't understand that, I built a house. I had to build it, and it was very hard. It was difficult work, moving wood, breaking my back in places, doing things that are difficult. And if you think that it's a simulation because when you come to this house, there's just a house built there, and it just was simulated by magic, then that's what shows that you have no real concept of nature and reality. So I think that's my ending view on, the simulation. Thanks, Mind Delusion, for everything that you helped me with there, with the basic, stupid things that I would forget. But, it's... I can't say it any better. A delusion? Yeah. So, he was just saying, something about his name there. So, I don't think that there's more to be said. You literally, if you believe in a simulation, I want you to go work breaking rocks and say, oh, this is all simulated, And, once you're done breaking rocks, I want you to build an entire cathedral and say, oh, well, all my pain is simulated. And, I'll come and I'll say, man, you did a really good job building this cathedral after you broke all the rocks to make it. And you'll say, no, it's a simulation. I'll say, all right, well, get the fuck out of the simulated fucking, thing you made then, and I'll use it. Thank you very much. You're out of your goddamn gourd. But at that point, you've broken rocks for fucking 20 years, and then you worked on a cathedral for another 20. You'll be like, no, this isn't a simulation. I did all this. I'm well aware that this isn't a simulation. So, thanks everybody for watching, and I appreciate, all the help with things, and I'll see you next time.